25. January 2003. The Australian citizen could buy a sturdy home to withstand the harsh elements of that southern climate, yet no level of aegis could fully deliver impunity from the fiercest of nature's disasters, the bushfire. Nothing tempered the sword proficiently as the blacksmith's flame, and out the other side of extreme tragedy, the land could purge and renew on a cycle of seasons, each fire leaving with it the wisdom of stories, the knowledge of its potency. A fear of God was the beginning of wisdom, and respect of the flame and its power held in revered stead the man astute enough to adhere. The bushlands had threatened combustion for months. Drought and a hot summer culminated in a fatal day of extreme heat and high winds, and a watch and act alert had been escalated to an emergency warning. The days had been spent dutifully preparing for the homestead, a defence against the threat. Charles had stripped the gutters clean of leaves, cleared the surrounding lawns of branches fallen in the wind, and prepped the rainwater tanks with garden hoses that wound the entire perimeter of the house. The hill was steep, and unlike most objects under gravity, a fire would relish the slope, and he knew the pine plantation nearby presented a significant threat of ember attack. The price of the lifestyle all at once seemed foolish. He felt himself a sitting duck at nature's mercy. Scenic locale, peaceful surroundings, a threat of death. A real estate agent wouldn't dare mention the fear of living in one's own home, like a mouse led to a trap. Inside the house, the television had been left on all day, with rolling coverage of the inferno that was spreading out to their west, and the children, now preteens, were heeding their father's warning and packing only their most precious belongings into their suitcases. Ruth had called her son from her Goulburn home. "Leave early," she had implored. "Everything you need is here." Everything they'd need. Who could make such a claim? Lockie had surveyed his bedroom, at the guitar that wouldn't fit in the car with more important possessions, the stuffed animals that took up a deceptive amount of space in his bag, or the books that he hated to bend or crease to save room. Better bent than lost for good. Maggie had said that, his father's new partner. They had been together for about a year now. Lockie barely considered the woman, choosing instead to simply accept her presence with a sullen indifference. On the other hand, Leah sculpted herself to the mould of a protégé, one who might teach her the ways of womanhood, one without the considerable age gap shared between her and her grandmother. Leave it all behind. Your life is more important than anything here. You're just copying what Maggie said, Leah. So it's not as easy as that. I don't want to leave anything behind. It's mine. Who has the right to take it away from me? Easy enough for Leah to say. The girl held herself at a distance from almost everything, floating from one aspect to another like a cottonweed. For Lockie, he saw himself more like a spider, held to one web of being and stubborn to move, or maybe like one of those bowerbirds who collected trinkets for validation and hoarded them to himself in a hidden nest where nobody could hurt him. The cicadas filled the reddened sky with their ear-splitting trill, enough to drive a man insane, and the acrid scent of smoke taunted the lurking horror that crept closer to them by the hour, the air around them like a furnace. The car was packed, a life of memories stuffed into a small vehicle. Death might rob these items of any value, but they were alive now, and they'd salvage what they could, even if it made for an uncomfortable car ride. The kids crammed themselves into the back seat, satiated by a lunch pack Maggie had made for them both. It'll be a little adventure. The sprinklers had been set, spewing a pathetic spray on and around the house. Time would tell whether it did anything to protect the home. Charles grunted into the car and shut the door, hands clutching the wheel as he caught his breath. That's all I can do. It is. There's every possibility the fire doesn't reach us. Bit of a pious wish there, Mag. Better to think that way, I reckon. For the kids. The ignition turned, and Lockie watched the house shrink from view as they drove down the hill to the road, trapped behind the glass of the car window, fading, until the trees hid it from view. He tried to prepare himself for the thought of never seeing his home again. Cinders flew erratically betwixt the pines, a fiery fay teasing an awful potential to the trunks that stood sentinel and awaited their terrible fate. They drove beneath power lines that crackled and sparked. Leah pointed to a fruit bat that hung lifelessly from the wires. King's Highway is still open, but I wonder if we go to the coast. Will take longer, but might be better. It would appear that they weren't the first to think of it. Both roads out of Braidwood, northwest towards Goulburn or east to Bateman's Bay, were lined with unmoving cars as far as they could see, segments of some metal centipede. Their progress slowed to a crawl, and above them the sky darkened further with a threatening red. Whether it was night or day, such could not be discerned. Lockie covered his face with his hands, choked for air in the confines of the car but unable to open the window and bear the horrific smells of the bushfire smoke, of the simmering fuel that burnt from the fumes of the traffic jam. His heart raced. The car was fortunate if it moved a few metres for every minute that passed. Looking at the rear windshield, the horizon glowed the colour of blood, the direction of his home, and when he looked forward to the sluggish progress of his path to salvation, he knew neither road was one he wanted. They were trapped. Why could he see it and nobody else? A hand was placed on his knee, his father's, who had looked over his shoulder in the static traffic and seen his son's distress. I know you're scared, mate, but I'll do everything I can to protect you. That has been my promise to you. I don't want to go. I want my home. I can't do this. Sometimes you have to let go of everything. I know it's hard, but we're alive. We're together. We can thank God for another day. It would be on another day, when the winds had dropped and the afternoon sun shone beautifully on the green fields around their home, that their father sat in the loft, eye fixed to the telescope. Within the fishbowl lens a waxing crescent loomed silent, another world that worried not of hellfire or strife. Time had told that the house had been spared of flame, but both house and inhabitants knew that already. Charles recalled being a 12-year-old boy and knowing there were men up there, men in space. What phase had the moon been on that day? It seemed like an important point. His daughter played on a Game Boy that spat quirky chip tunes from her bedroom door, barely audible over the jilted piano sounds issued from his son's room. My children, their little worlds. His son was practicing scales, each progressively darker than the last, until a certain dissonant tonality caught Charles's attention, and he stood behind his boy and watched in amazement. They can do things I can't. His left hand stretching to depress an octave of F sharp, the boy ran his fingers of his right hand up and down the white keys. That's a weird one, mate. A startled shudder ran through the boy. He had not heard his father come in. It's called Locrian. No kidding, replied Charles. I'm not sure it works. Everywhere I read it says the same thing. Don't use Locrian mode. Why is it here though? How can it have no purpose? There's 7 of these things, and only 6 of them function. Leftovers, I guess. Lowering his hand by a semitone, he resumed playing the same notes, but with an F natural instead. That's nicer, said Charles. It's Lydian, replied Lockie. Yes, Lydian.